Has this ever happened to you? Someone has come up to you, you're the pastor of the church, or maybe you're a staff member, and someone wants to complain about your spouse. Now, this happened to me, and it hadn't happened frequently, but it has happened to me. And I never had anyone teach me at seminary or mentor me otherwise on how to handle those situations. On this edition on Revitalize and Replant, Mark Clifton and I, Thom Rainer, are going to talk to you and help walk you through this awkward situation. And we're going to give you 5 reasons or 5 responses that you can have. And we will have a bonus. And if you're watching via YouTube, you see Mark holding up 6 fingers. 6, so you'll get 5 plus 1. There's that equals the 6.
And I got the really cool little rubber wedding ring that all the young kids are wearing today. So that's what.
Okay.
That's such a said that.
And I'm sure it's less expensive than what these oldie guys wear.
Yes, it is.
As always, thank you, the North American Mission Board and Revitalize and Replant, for sponsoring this podcast. Once again, go to churchreplanters.com. What do they do? North American Mission Board has incredible ministries. They have disaster relief. They have new church planting, which is kind of the heartbeat. They have evangelism. I could go on, but they also have replanting churches and revitalizing churches. And that's what we talk about on this podcast. We're always grateful to the North American Mission Board. If you want more information about replanting and revitalization, go to churchreplanters.com. Mark, I didn't ask you this question ahead of time as a prep, but you ever had someone come to you complaining about your spouse?
In all honesty, no. I mean, I know that sounds crazy, but no. No, I really haven't. Sometimes I've had them come and say, "Is everything okay with her, with Jill?" Jill, it initially was extremely introverted and shy, and so she just didn't. As we've been married and she's grown in the role, that's become really not an issue anymore. But there were times when people would, "Is she okay?" Because she didn't talk much. She might kind of stay off to the side some initially. But once people got to know her, then no, never. I've been incredibly blessed. Listen, Dr. Rainer, I make enough messes for both of us, right?
Yeah, you do.
So
I want to affirm you in that.
Well, I've been incredibly blessed. I must say there are many things in these podcasts I can relate to, but in all seriousness, God gave me the most wonderful, low maintenance, low drama wife you could ever imagine. And for her to be married to somebody like me who is high maintenance and high drama, it's just crazy. But she is just so rock solid, steady. And so, no, I really haven't experienced that. But in 40 years of serving with pastors and helping lead pastors, I hear it all the time. And I got tons of stories of other guys who experienced that.
You know the first 2 words I heard from your wife?
What was that?
Oh, dear.
Oh.
Do you remember the context?
I do not, no.
You and I were sitting at a table and someone came up to you and said, "Are you Mark Clifton?" She says, "Oh, dear."
Yeah.
You impressed the young man, but your wife was not that impressed.
She wasn't that impressed. Here we go again.
Oh, dear.
And we did it with a hat. That happens a lot, even here in Kansas City. It happened the other night. We'll be out someplace, and somebody will come up and they'll go, "I'm sorry, are you Mark Clifton?" I can tell she goes, "Oh, here we go again." So yeah, oh dear, not impressed. That's true.
The one time it happened to me, the context is my wife was working in the nursery, helping. She on a regular basis during worship service. She was in the orchestra, and she was faithful in our small groups called Sunday School, and she was there all the time. And someone came up to me and complained and said she's not doing enough. I didn't get any of my 5 points from that particular encounter. I just want you to know that.
Oh, now let me say this seriously, as serious as I can be. There have been numerous times that people have come up to Jill and complained about me. I mean, and I'm not making jokes about that. I mean,
it does work more the other way.
It does. And there have been times, and spot on. Mark forgot to do this. Mark overpromised that. Mark didn't show up at this. Mark, I get that. And so bless her heart, she needs a podcast. Somebody needs to give her a podcast on how to deal with that mess, because that's a lot more real on my end than the other. But yeah, I hear you. So that's another podcast for another day, probably, how we can help spouses deal with the when their husband is the pastor. Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, first thing, even if you just have a few seconds, pray for wisdom and calmness. Just, Lord, this is the most evil person in the world saying this. Please help me get through this.
Don't answer out of emotion and out of anger, and don't ratchet it up. I mean, don't take it to the next level, which is very easy to do, and make it worse than it already is. I would agree with that totally.
And there were times as well that church members complained to me about my sons, especially when they were little. I don't want to point one out over the other, but my middle son tended to wander off and would end up in places he shouldn't be. In the church building, someone would say, your son is over there. So where is he? Well, he's in the baptistry jumping around, So there was no water in it. It was dry, but he was jumping around. And then another one came to me one time and said, your oldest son, Sam, he's lying down on the floor in the foyer. And and it was while people were walking around through. Yeah. So there have been some times that I've had to deal with that. But if that one occasion, pray for calm and wisdom. Don't jump to conclusions. Don't say anything that is irrational. Not too long ago, Mark, I had a post about the dumbest thing that I have done as a married man of 44 years. And I said it's one of the most stupid things I've done. It's not the most stupid. And that's to try to win arguments with my wife. Not that they weren't winnable, somewhat, but the whole idea that if you are trying to win, you are competing with your wife instead of letting your wife compliment you. That was the whole thesis of it. And I'm so competitive. If we get into an argument, my first inclination is I want to win this one. I want to rationalize it. Same thing here. You're going to want to win this argument because they're attacking your spouse. Number 2, let the church member know your spouse is someone you love dearly. You'll defend them without hesitation. The first thing you do is you got their back. If you don't have your spouse's back, then you're in trouble.
Exactly. And again, someone comes to you and says your wife and whatever, your spouse said something that hurt my feelings or did something out of inappropriate or whatever, and they just begin to, again, you don't respond with anger and angst. You just say, I'm sorry to hear that. I don't really understand why, but you need to know that, I care deeply and love and love her and she's the love of my life. And so when you're talking about her, you're talking about me, that kind of thing. And don't, by all means, do I need to say this? By all means, don't kind of throw your spouse under the bus in order to make a point with a church member.
Nope.
I can tell you, I've had that experience where I've had some young men that have kind of done that. They've tried to play both sides. They didn't want to make the deacon mad, so they sort of would go, well, yeah, I know she can be that way sometimes, but that's not the way to behave. That's not the way to do it. You can't do that. You have to say, well, I'm really sorry that happened. I'm sure we can look into that, but you need to know, man, she and I are one, as the scripture says. And when you say that about her, you say that about me, and I'm going to love and protect her. You've got to say that in a very calm and very dispassionate kind of way.
And we all need to remember, those of us who are in local church ministry, we all need to remember that it's not family versus church as if they are competing organisms. It is family that is first in line in the church. They're the first members that you minister to. And in our case, the first people to whom we should minister would be our wives, and then our children if they're at home, and then the church members. So not only is there the priority because you're one in marriage, there's the priority because they are the first line of ministry in the local church as well. All right, number 3, let the church member know it's inappropriate to come to you with a problem with your spouse. This is not a biblical way of dealing with those matters. I don't know how you'll say that. And I don't have the precise words, but that's not how to deal with a problem with someone else, especially to go to their spouse.
Well, I'm trying, I would think that would be the case. They come to you and say, your wife said this, or your spouse did that, and, or they didn't do this. And you say, look, I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm sorry there's some issues here, but probably just coming to me with this is not the best, not the appropriate way. Have you talked to them about it? And can we
Yeah.
talk to them about it together? Let's go talk to them about it. I'm just not going to listen to anything else you say about my spouse until we bring my spouse into this conversation. So can we just understand that that's the biblical way to do it? And I have talked to them and they said this. Well, then let's all three go together. Maybe we should take one of our deacons with us and that kind of thing. Again, look, I know it's so easy. I'm doing a podcast with Dr. Rayner here in my house, right? It's easy for me to say, hey, chill out. But when someone comes and accuses your spouse of something that is not true, man, you just want to get your dander up, man. You just want to really fight and protect, and yet at the same time, you don't want to ratchet that up, and you want them to know you have a calm confidence in the gospel, a calm confidence in who you are, a deep and abiding love for your spouse. And you can handle anything. And you say, look, this is not, you don't say probably, this isn't the way to handle this. If you've got a problem with my spouse, let's bring the spouse into it. And if you've already done that, then let's find another person and let's sit down and pray about this and see what this issue is all about. Because sometimes, Dr. Rayner, are you ready for this? They just want to hurt you.
Yep.
This isn't about anything other than they just don't like you. They don't like something you did. They don't like something your spouse did. They just want to dig at you a little bit. And so if you let them know they hurt you, well, then they win. And then they're going to do it again. You've rewarded them for that behavior. And if you don't let them know they've hurt you, then you've not rewarded them for that behavior.
Yep, exactly. I know we shouldn't do this, but there is the temptation to say, since you've come to me with this problem about your spouse, I need to respond by going to your spouse and talking to that person. I'm not recommending that, but
I wouldn't recommend that either.
That might put a perspective on it. How would you like for me to go talk to your spouse about you?
So you could just use a yo mama joke and go from that too. So I mean, that would be. I've got some of those if you want to. No, all right.
So ultimately, somehow you've got to communicate, and this is kind of a summary statement, that you're not going to be a sounding board for complaints about your spouse. So that's the message that you want to get across. If they think they're going to engender pain with you, you're not going to be a part of it.
But at the same time, you don't want to give them any room to say you're not willing to listen to a legitimate issue.
Yes.
I think you can't look like you got a blind spot there. If they come to you with a problem with your children or you or your spouse or a staff member or a staff member's spouse or whatever, you can't just immediately, you just have to say, listen, this isn't the forum to do this here in the hallway or one-on-one in our office when the other people aren't here. I really want to protect and respect these people that I love and that I work with. I also respect you and what you're doing. So let's set a time and let's bring all the parties together and let's talk about this issue.
I agree.
And sometimes they don't want to do that, and I don't want to do that. Well, then you've just diffused it, but you haven't. You've done it in I think a very intelligent kind of way. So that's how I would deal with it.
This is not about spouses, but I talked to, I don't remember who it was, and I don't guess it's that important. But someone who was telling me the story about his executive pastor for many, many years. And he told me that someone went to the executive pastor with a complaint about the pastor, he would say, hey, pastor's right here. Can we go have a meeting together? Or, hey, I have his calendar. Let's schedule a meeting so the three of us can get together and talk about it. He said it diffused almost every one of them.
Yep.
And have a friend like that would be great. Did you tell me that story?
Right. No, it wasn't me. But sometimes they just want to hurt you. They just want to dig at you. And if you let them know they haven't hurt you and we're really going to deal with the issue, then a lot of times they will back down. And if it's a real issue, we'll talk about it later. Go ahead. Next one.
That'll be the bonus question and the bonus point in just a moment. Okay, so here is where I am. If you want to disagree with me, please do so. I say in most cases, it's best to tell your spouse about the complaint. Some pastors would say, no, I'm not going to go to them and hurt them there. But first of all, married couples should not be hiding things from each other. So that's one thing. And second of all, what if they hear the same thing from a secondary source that someone went to the pastor with a complaint about the wife, spouse, whatever the case may be? How would you respond to that? I said in most cases, not in all cases, but in most cases, it's best to tell your spouse about the complaint.
Boy, that's really difficult to know. I would consider the source. If this is a person who just has a pattern of just being, cantankerous and says a lot of bad things about a lot of people, if it's a person of that this is unusual, they don't normally talk about people, and they have a lot of influence in the church. I think that's one of you just got to really pray about it, and you really got to be sensitive to the leadership of the Holy Spirit, and you've got to understand your spouse, and you got to understand, is the cure worse than the ailment?
So there's some contextual issues.
There is contextualization. I mean, you don't need to tell your kids and your spouse everything that goes on in the church, because they don't have that ministry. You do. But if I would just hate for the spouse to find out
otherwise.
I think you're right. I think if they found out you knew and you didn't tell them, you don't want them to be blindsided by it. It also depends on what they're talking about. I mean, if they're just saying, your wife doesn't talk enough and she's not friendly enough, I don't know about. I'd share that. I don't know. I don't know.
People used to say that about me. No, wait a minute. People still say that
about you.
Yes.
Well, that's a difficult one. I mean, we don't have to have it. We don't have to have an absolute answer for every problem on this podcast. I think that's a difficult issue, because here's the deal, right? That person may resolve it and be over with it, but then your spouse is always going to walk around feeling like that person doesn't like me. It's going to hinder their view of that person. I think that's an issue. I think I agree with you, and I agree with me. How about that? So
okay, well, we're two good people, so we'll agree. We'll agree with both sides. Okay.
I'm interested. This is YouTube, right? In the comments, just tell us, have you done this? And let us know, because we're a couple old men that don't know how to do about this. So let us know. Should you tell your wife if someone says something bad about her, or should you not? And in the comments, let us know if you did and how it went. And then we'll ignore those, and we won't ever talk. No, we'll read them and look at them, and we'll talk about it maybe later. Because I would be interested to know. That would be a real interesting thing to know. I want to be. I know one thing for sure. I don't tell my wife everything people would say about me.
Oh, I definitely don't.
I would not do that, because that would hinder them. But you don't want her to be blindsided. You don't want her to feel like you kept things from her. I totally agree with that. But you do have a ministry of protecting her and not bringing hurt to her. And again, that's a tough one. So,
well, let's bring this to an employment relationship, not just a spousal relationship. Amy's in the production area. You cannot see her on YouTube. You cannot hear her on the podcast. But Amy and I have worked together for 11 years, and Amy does not tell me every negative thing she hears about me. She will tell me if she thinks I need to hear it. And the reason for that is different for everything. But if you're visible, you're going to get a lot of hits. And if she came to me with every negative complaint or negative thing said about me, that would become her full-time job. So So she has been judicious, and I think you need to know this. And so when she tells me I think you need to know, guess what? I need to know those things. And I cannot remember one time that I've heard something that came to her first and I heard it later where I said, I wish you would have told me. So maybe
Yeah, I don't want to talk this to death here, but maybe early on when some people would say that Jill was really quiet, is she okay? And I would say, yeah, let me tell you about her. This is who she is. This is her behavior. This is her, this is what. And they go, that's fine. I don't think I need to go to her then and say, hey, this woman thinks you're too quiet. I think I was able to describe what the issue was, and that kind of thing. So no one's ever thought I was too quiet. It's never been a
problem on this podcast. Not at all. It reminds me of the old Beatles song. I believe it's from the Hard Day's Night album. We can work it out. Try to see it my way. Try to see it your way. We can work it out. But
you know what Jill does now of her own volition, and she wants to do it, and she makes me get to church early. She's our main greeter at the door now.
Oh wow, how times have changed.
Yeah, how times have changed. She's just the main greeter, and she loves doing that. So that really is cool. So I wanted to put that out there.
As we wrap it up, it's bonus time. Bonus time with Mark Clifton. Not do you get 5, but there's more. You get a 6
today only. Listen, maybe there's some truth in what they're saying. Now, I'm not. Don't throw them under the bus, but just because sometimes we're a little blinded by our spouses, by our love for them and our affection for them and our fear of them, and so.
Oh God!
So we're a little blinded. I've seen it. I've done I've been a denominational dude all my life. I work with pastors. A lot of guys who their wives or a lot of sometimes it's their wives are on church staff and their husband's a problem, but their spouse is an issue and they don't really see it. And so when someone comes and says, your spouse did X, Y, and Z, do everything we just said. Say, this isn't the way to talk about it. You know, I love them. You're talking about them. You're talking about me. We need to deal. But you need to really look outside yourself. Ask someone, maybe even outside the church. And that's what's happened to me, Dr. Rayner. I've had occasions where guys have come to me and said, I've got some people in my church that are saying this about my spouse, and they're saying she's this and that and that. And I got to go, you know, bro, they're not wrong.
Oh, gosh.
And, you know, they're not totally wrong. I have seen her spout off to people. I have seen her kind of catch an attitude with some folks. And I think you really got to figure out some way to deal with that. I mean, even when I said that, I saw Amy's face. You can't see Amy's face. Amy's face grimaced like, ouch. But if he's blindsided by that, that's going to be a problem in his ministry forever, right?
Yes.
And so if you're getting the same complaints all the time about your spouse, back up and go see a marriage Christian counselor, go see another pastor you trust. Is there any truth in this at all? I just don't think we can end this podcast without saying there might be. It might not just be nothing. And there might be something there. I can't believe I just said all that. But.
And that is your bonus. Aren't you excited that you went away with that type of edification to end this podcast? And that's the way we'll end this. But we do want to hear from you. We've got a lot of, there's a bit of ambiguity in some of our responses. And Mark leans one way, I lean another way. Let us know what you think on some of these. And we'd love to hear from you. So if you're listening on podcast, give us a rating and review. If you're here on YouTube, give us a, is it a like or a rating or review?
Well, you want to subscribe.
Subscribe. That's what it is.
That's right. If you don't subscribe, we'll remove your internet from your house. So
exactly.
We have the ability to do that. So
we'll put an invisible shield over every place where you are. Thank you for being here at Revitalize and Replant. My name is Thom Rayner. I've been joined by Mark Clifton, and we're helping churches revitalize and replant to get healthier together.